Hello everyone. So today we're going to talk about the practical truth behind animal sacrifice. Now, it's very misunderstood, and I would like first off to say that I'm a vegetarian, but there are some things about animal sacrifice, how it happened and how it does happen, that we should keep in mind moving forward with this conversation. But I'm going to begin the video with an interesting little magical ritual to raise awareness in the room. Now, this is a weird way to begin this video, considering the title, but I feel like there's certain elements of magic that are also misunderstood. So, what I'm going to be doing, very briefly, is right here I have this ghee lamp that is filled with ghee basically in the cup part of it on the top. Then we have a basic cotton wick hanging off, and we have a mortar and pestle right here for grinding up herbs and resins, things like that. Then we have cloves, and we have eucalyptus oil and cum powder, which is basically for anointing like you might see in Christianity, but it's more of a Hindu thing, and I am Hindu. Now, I'm going to begin by basically grinding up the eucalyptus and the clove in this mortar and pestle. I don't need a whole lot of it, probably just a shake, and you can buy this clove at any supermarket. Well, most supermarkets anyway. Just buy it in the herbs or spices section. And this eucalyptus oil is essential oil, so you'll have to order this online or find a spiritual shop. And I use eucalyptus, I wouldn't say quite often, but I find that it's very uplifting. So I'm just going to put a couple drops, maybe about 6 drops actually, in there with the clove. And basically all I'm going to do is take this part and mash it in the mortar. Now I just need a little bit to put in this ghee lamp, and that's the basic idea, in order for a very energizing effect on one's spirit and one's consciousness. So since I'm not using a whole lot of clove, I just need to grind it up for a bit. And what I'd like to say about magic is that it's a big part of most spiritual traditions, if not every spiritual tradition. And there is some roots in magic in every major religion in the world. Magic is just basically the taking of action in the spiritual world in one's own hands and not relying upon a priest, a Brahmin, sometimes a monk if you live in a lay community, or a priestess or a pastor or anybody like that. And magic is something that people have used for, as far back as human beings began to become self-aware. But we started to think that because some of the things that we could do as individuals seemed very separate from organized religion, in order to affect change in the spiritual world, it has been demonized for, I would say, at least 1,000 years, at the very least. And much longer if we look back at ancient religions, and when they became more dogmatic. So I'm just going to take some of this clove that I've ground up with the eucalyptus oil and kind of sprinkle it in with the ghee. And I'm combining multiple things in this little magical ritual in order to affect a higher state of awareness. But I find that when I make my own combinations of different traditions, I can affect change better in my own life. Now, as somebody who practices magic, I can safely say that it doesn't have to be complicated. You just have to have the will, you just have to research a bit, and you just have to have the ability to take time out of your day in order to have an effect on your spiritual growth. These are the basic founding elements of how to live a magical life. And I have gone into greater detail in other videos, but for the sake of this video, I'm just raising a little bit of awareness at the beginning through energy, and then we'll dive right into the topic. So now, with my intention and heart of raising awareness, I light this ghee lamp. Once again, with eucalyptus oil and clove ground up in a mortar and pestle and sprinkled into the ghee, just right into the lamp. And then with still a little bit on my fingers from putting my fingers into the mortar, I'm going to take a little bit of this cum powder and anoint my forehead with it, specifically my third eye. Now I think it's safe to say we are ready to begin. Now, the practical truth behind animal sacrifice is that animal sacrifice has happened among every people for as far back as we have recorded history, and probably far before that, considering the small amount that we found that we've uncovered. Now, for the ancient Greeks, usually we think about, Homer, when they sacrificed hecatombs to the gods, and they sacrificed the fattiest bones from the cattle, and burned and basically charred the meat, burned it, and then they ate it. When we think about sacrificing animals to the gods, we have this horrible idea in our head that the animals are sacrificed in mass and just left out. They're not eaten, so it's a pointless ritual, and they're not used in a way that we consider as proper in Western society. But this is very far from the truth. What it comes down to is that when people sacrificed animals, and we're using ancient Greece as an example here, when they sacrificed them to the gods, most people did not have meat as a big part of their diet. They might have very little meat throughout their entire lives because they couldn't afford it, especially if they weren't somewhere where they could hunt a large amount to provide for their village, for their town, for their family. If that being the case, when these animals were sacrificed to the gods, people were giving thanks for the meat that was being sacrificed, for the animals that were being sacrificed. Once people gave thanks to the gods and the animals were slaughtered, then the people would eat the meat. Now, because this ritual is attached to killing the animal, it becomes repugnant in our minds. Like, why would you sacrifice animals to the gods? But when we really look at it, and let's zoom back to now, the modern time, when animals are sacrificed in small quantities, 1 or 2 or 3, for instance, in Vodou, the animals are raised in a way that they are not kept in torment or pain. And if done correctly, as it should be, as every true Vaudouisant wants to do it, if the animal is sacrificed in a proper way, it does not feel pain. It does not feel a vast quantity of torment during its life and at the point that it ends. Now, when, for instance, a rooster is offered or sacrificed and offered to Papa Legba, then that rooster is most likely going to be eaten. And if not, it's going to be left out at the crossroads for other animals to eat it, and the cycle of life continues. Now, in ancient Greece, the protein, the meat, not necessarily the protein, because we get protein from plants, but the meat itself they gave thanks for it because most people didn't have meat. And they made the significance of killing and eating the animal so high in their minds when they offered it to the gods that it gave it more significance. And this ties back into what we're doing when animal sacrifice is enacted nowadays. When a rooster is sacrificed properly in Vodou, and the participants in the ritual eat it, they're placing great significance on the life of that animal. And its pain is not extraneous, it's not drawn out. And they consume the rooster or the chicken, just like we might buy from a fast food restaurant. But here's the thing. When it comes to animal sacrifice, and even hunting, if you give the same significance to it, and assuming that it isn't done in vast quantities, and you're not killing a bunch of animals that couldn't possibly be eaten, and you're not killing them in a painful way, which every true spiritual person or magical practitioner will say, you taint the offering and you waste the life when you keep that animal in pain and fear for its life, and you kill it in a painful way. It becomes lackluster. It becomes a waste of the energy you could have appreciated and devoted to something higher, a higher form of yourself, and where you want to go. But nowadays, we find that slaughterhouses are rampant. McDonald's, Burger King, Whataburger, they get the vast majority of their meat from a slaughterhouse environment. Actually, the majority of their meat from a slaughterhouse environment. These animals' lives from birth to death are perpetual pain, perpetual agony. They're not raised in a respectful way. When they're killed, they're not done. It is not done so in a respectful way, and it is never with a consideration. Well, I mean, there's been certain innovations that have given consideration to the animal's pain, but the animal's pain is not really considered by those in the slaughterhouse. It is to produce the meat. It is to take the meat from the animal. The animal is not appreciated, and it lives its entire life in muddy pens and with too little food. And it does not have the quality of life that it could if we just didn't allow ourselves to be so dependent on meat. Now, when we look at animal sacrifice, and there are some festivals in Asia that do sacrifice to gods, and they sacrifice vast quantities of animals, and most of them are not eaten. That is not the true way to sacrifice animals. It is just a blood fest. The true way to feel the offering to the gods, to be a part of the ritual, is to do it one or two animals in a group of people, but not just a vast quantity of animals, and then people readying themselves to eat them, and not really taking part in the essence of animal sacrifice. They're taking part in just the product of pain. And when you sacrifice animals in vast quantities, like they do in some festivals in Asia, then there is no care in regard to the animal's value as an individual soul, or its pain, or the life that it could have lived until you were ready to eat it. Now, besides this ridiculous practice that we sometimes find in festivals in Asia, even basically killing dogs, but that's nothing to do with sacrifice to the gods at all. That's just an eating dog festival, and usually the pain is drawn out. It's terrible. But when we compare those festivals, when we think of vast animal sacrifice, it sounds horrible. It sounds terrible. When we think of one or two animals being sacrificed, it doesn't sound as bad. But when we look at the slaughterhouses in the United States and the amount of meat that we consume, well, I haven't consumed meat in 5 years, but the vast majority of people in the United States consume very large quantities of meat. When we look at slaughterhouses, these animals' lives are never good. They are never valued, and we never take consideration for the animal, its soul, and what we are truly eating when we're eating a burger. And I didn't have any awareness about this, but I truly became a vegetarian, not only when I stopped eating meat, but when I realized that the value of a life is more important than gaining the pleasure of appetite, of taste. I still crave chicken, but I don't eat chicken. But would I eat a chicken that was, if I was a part of a ritual, and a chicken was sacrificed to one of the Loa in the Vodou tradition? If I participated in the ritual and the chicken was killed, and it was a small group of people, and we all knew the significance of that life, we all accepted that we are sacrificing this to the spirits, and they consume it through us, which is the idea in the ancient Greek tradition that the gods were eating the animal through them. I would be far more okay, at least, with eating that chicken instead of just ordering some nuggets at Chick-fil-A. Because we truly accept that the source, the process, and the offering is done in a way to where it is a part of our lives. The animal is a part of our lives, and we understand it. We try to understand it. But if it's just slaughtered and its pain is drawn out beforehand, and we're just eating to get calories, we're just eating because it tastes good, then that's more of an abomination than animal sacrifice ever was, especially in the quantities that we eat meat in the United States. Now, this video isn't meant to make anybody feel bad for eating meat, but we must hold our understanding of animal sacrifice in retrospect with the knowledge of how we slaughter animals in the United States and how this goes on. Even dairy cows are treated with so much pain all the way until their death. And I'm working on getting rid of that part of my diet. But the meat especially, if I may be biased, holds so much more of that pain and suffering. I'm talking about it on an energetic level, but I'm also talking about on a chemical level. As we're starting to realize through science that it makes the meat taste a lot worse when pain is experienced throughout the life and at the end, because it actually is bad for us. And this is why hunters and small-scale slaughterhouses, I guess you could say, try not to have any fear enter the minds of the animals before they die, leaving them unawares. But most of them still don't value the life of the animal. But when we're thinking about animal sacrifice and thinking how terrible it is, we need to only look to the slaughterhouses in the United States and watch a few videos and realize we're doing far worse to animals than our ancestors did, than our ancestors could, on an industrial scale. So hey, this has been the practical truth behind animal sacrifice. I hope you found this interesting. I began it with a little practical magic, and I ranted a bit on animal sacrifice. I hope that you respond in the comment section below if you think that none of this makes sense, or if you agree, or if you think animal sacrifice is evil, is you're sacrificing to evil gods and evil spirits. Well, you need to only look to the Old Testament for some of that so-called evil. But what I condone animal sacrifice, I wouldn't necessarily say I condone it, but I wouldn't find it as repugnant as some of the other things that we do. Would I participate in it as far as consuming it? I'd be more likely to, but I don't think that I would. So I'm going to end it with that. I hope to see all of you in the future, and feel free to support me on Patreon because I really need it. And all of you, consider yourselves, and all of you, have a great day.